Well, hello and welcome to an all-new Channel 2012 First Look video. Today I bring you Microsoft's long-awaited follow-up to Windows 8, Windows 10. This video is going to cover installation, initial configuration, I'm going to demonstrate a few of Windows 10's new features, and I'm also just going to share some of my first impressions based on primitive real-world tests. And hopefully by the end of this video I'll have shown you pretty much everything you need to know before you install Windows 10. Alright, so we're here at the first screen of the Windows 10 installer. Before we dive into that, let me just explain where you can get a copy of Windows 10 if you're interested in trying this out yourself. Microsoft has available on their website free download of the ISO, both 64-bit and 32-bit versions. The processor in my computer doesn't support hardware virtualization, so I'm limited to just trying the 32-bit version, but you can feel free to download whichever one you want. They have the product key available there as well. There's no need to register or sign into anything. It's just a free download. They're available for anyone. With that said, now we will take a closer look at the installer here. If you've ever installed Windows Vista, Windows 7, or Windows 8 before, this will look very familiar. It's basically the same thing. Although, if you ask me, they have made this a little more bland and a little less interesting in the last few years with Windows 8. I really wish they would go back to the style of this setup that they had going with Windows Vista and Windows 7. Alright, all that stuff looks good. Let's go to the next screen here. Not a whole lot of options here, so we'll just tell it we want to install now. Alright, here we are. Seems pretty agreeable to me. Alright, we got the same standard upgrade or custom choice. And here we go. Looks like it's going to start the installation already. It's kind of odd it didn't ask for a product key or anything like that yet. My guess is that it'll ask for it later on in the installation process. And we're back here at the start of the first run setup wizard after only a little over 15 minutes of installation. Now granted, I'm doing this on a virtual machine using an ISO, so if you install it on a real computer with a CD or DVD, that time might take a little bit longer. You can speed that up by applying that ISO to a USB drive though, and booting from that if your motherboard supports it. Anyway, we'll go ahead and step through the first run setup wizard here now at this time. As you can see, it looks pretty much the same as the one in Windows 8. Not a whole lot different going on with that. As we're stepping through this, let me just go on record to say that I really don't like this full screen bland setup wizard Windows 8 style thing. I didn't like it in Windows 8 and I don't like it here. The Windows 7 one was just so much quicker and easier, more intuitive, and it looked better to boot. It's saying next we will set up my account. Okay, I don't want to use my Microsoft account. Okay, let me go on record once again to say this. This is going to be a bit of a rant here, so bear with me. This pisses me off, unlike anything else. Sign into your Microsoft account, it says. Okay, great. I don't want to use my Microsoft account with Windows 10. I didn't want to use it with Windows 8.1 either. I hate how it does this. So you just, you click next thinking you'll be able to get by it. No, it asks you to make one there. And there's no, obvious skip button either. The only way around this is pretty counterintuitive. You go over here you click the Create a New Account button. And then you press Sign in without a Microsoft account. From here, I can proceed to setting up the computer how I normally would. Oh boy, we got the same hi. While we're setting things up for you, learn about the new way to use Windows. This is the same thing that I complained about in my Windows 8 setup video when I set it up on that Core 2 Duo MacBook. I said, that I always questioned the use of pronouns in Windows and how it says funny stuff like we're doing this, or when it's like installing updates, it'll say don't unplug or power off your computer, where in those cases it should say Windows is setting up. Don't power off or unplug the computer, and that kind of thing. This kind of stuff just is kind of silly and doesn't make any sense. But I do see a change on the screen. Instead of that weird thing, that picture of the mouse flying into the corner where people would wonder, what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to be following along, moving the mouse in the corner? Am I supposed to press a key? What am I supposed to do? That is now gone. It appears to be replaced with you can get new apps from the store. For those of you not familiar, that's one of those annoying things in Windows 8 that nobody used. So don't take too much note of that. It's just one of those stupid things that's a moot point. It's irrelevant. And finally, after quite some time, we have made it to the desktop. At this time, I'm just going to take a few moments to optimize things. I'm going to install VMware tools and some software I use on a regular basis, like a web browser and that type of thing. And then we're going to take a closer look at Windows 10. And we're back here with everything set up and properly configured. Now, to provide a bit of an overview of noteworthy features here, I'm going to divide this last part of the video here into two parts. We're going to go over what's new and what's old. For what's new, I'm going to explain some of the stuff that's changed since prior versions of Windows, for the good and the bad. And for what's old, I will explain things that, surprised me to still see in Windows 10 for the good and the bad again as well. Anyway, for what's new, Windows 10 is officially Windows NT 6.4, as you can see over here. Just to bring you all up to speed if you weren't familiar, Vista represented NT 6, Windows 7 represented NT 6.1, Windows 8 point nothing represented NT 6.2, and Windows 8.1 represented NT 6.3. So they're kind of trying to create some distance here between Windows 8.1 and Windows 8 because those had received a bit of a bad reputation. Anyway, let's take a look at some other things that are new. Refreshingly enough, the ever-annoying Windows charms are completely absent. Those things that we had kind of grown accustomed to in Windows 8 and 8.1 are now gone, even though the settings has the box to enable the charms checked. They're nowhere to be found. In fact, none of the annoying corner features that I talked about in my Windows 8 overview video are here anymore, so that's always a positive sign. Now, the first thing you might notice, if I can draw your attention down here to the taskbar area, there's a lot of stuff different down here. For starters, there seems to be wider spacing between all of these icons, and I don't know if that's because VMware is tricking Windows 10 into thinking this is a tablet, because I also see that it's put a button for the keyboard down here, or maybe that's just how it is all the time, but the spacing between icons is definitely larger down there. Also, notification balloons, those little bubbles that used to come up above these icons when a program wanted to get your attention, the functionality of those is now combined with toasts, those little rectangles that appear up here in this area of the screen. Now, while the spacing between these icons is larger, the button on the side for arrow peak is actually smaller, but it does still perform the same functionality, and you can click on it to show the desktop. Everything else down here is pretty much the same, although you might have noticed a couple new looking buttons here. We've got a search button and a button labeled task view. Search is just plain useless, and task view is basically now a shortcut to the Windows key plus tab or Alt key plus tab functionality that's kind of been morphed into one. I'll go over those a little bit more later in the video, but what you do need to know most importantly about these buttons down here is that they are not movable and they cannot be removed at this point. So that's something I'm going to be making a note of specifically when I send feedback. And if you choose to download Windows 10 and install it yourself, I would suggest you do the same. Speaking of the taskbar area, the Start menu is now available once again in both large and small configurations. Even though I have it turned off here, Recent Programs is back, as is a proper search tool that was reintroduced in Windows 8.1. It is, however, noteworthy that the feature is a little bit broken and that there is no back button to bring you back to the Start menu. The only way back is to either click on the Start button twice or to press the Escape key on the keyboard. If you were a fan of the small style Start menu but still liked those big, fun-to-click, colorful tiles from the big Start menu, those are now available in the small Start menu. You're free to organize those however you like, and they work basically the same way. My only complaint here is that there's no way to unhighlight recently installed programs. In the past, there was always an option where you could uncheck the box for highlighting recently installed programs. Also, the way pinning stuff works is kind of annoying too. When you pin something, it'll always come up here in the tiles pane, if you want to call it that, by default. And then if you want those pinned items to appear in this part of the Start menu, you have to drag them there. And in the case of things that you only wanted pinned in this area, you have to first pin them here, drag them and drop them into this area, and then unpin them here. So that's a little bit counterintuitive, but it's a start, so we'll give them that. Now, in other areas of the experience, you may have noticed that borders around the windows are now much smaller, often to a fault. And this causes anomalies in certain areas of the user interface. For example, right-clicking on one of these, this whole thing here looks kind of funny, as does this. And there's other kind of odd things in areas of the user interface that really aren't optimized for this, and to be honest, it really just doesn't look that good. On the plus side, Windows do now drop a little bit more of a shadow, similar to the way they did in Windows 7. I kind of like that shadowed look. Some people might find that it's a bit too much, but for the most part I was impressed with it, and I'll take any good aspects of Windows that I can at this point, honestly. Now, moving on to arrow features, arrow peak and arrow shake still work the same as they always have, but arrow snap has been improved to support corners. You know, in the past you could only go to the left or to the right. Now you can put stuff in the corners if you want. this comes at the price of this feature being uglified. Now it's just kind of this dull square rectangles when you put the windows close to those areas of the screen, and it just doesn't look as nice as it did in Windows 7 and Windows 8. Also improved is the command prompt. It now displays a more realistic resolution. Text size changes are better. Text wrapping has been improved. They have keyboard shortcuts in it. And now for the first time, you can make the command prompt full screen. You may have also noticed that it also offers some opacity. And I don't know why this isn't offered in any other software by default. It was just something I kind of stumbled on by accident while fumbling around in the settings. But that is there for people who want to use it. Also available for the first time ever, as I mentioned earlier, is support for workspaces. You can press Windows key plus tab and click Add a Desktop to create a new workspace, if you're so inclined. When you do that, you can kind of see stuff that's opened. It kind of does a neat effect with that stuff down there. This has never really been a feature that I felt like I would have used, but I'm sure this is something that would be useful for some people for sure. Also noteworthy, the Windows key plus tab feature returns, albeit at reduced capacity. In the past, you remember that it did that arrow flip feature, which is now mysteriously gone from Windows 8 as well as Windows 10. But at least now in Windows 10 it actually does something. It brings up the here's all the stuff you have open and here's the buttons for opening other workspaces. Not quite as pretty as arrow flip, but at least it makes some kind of use of the Windows key plus tab. Also noteworthy is that pressing the Alt key and tab does basically the same thing, except you have to keep holding down the Alt button, and there's no option for multiple workspaces. And it lines up all the windows in this, kind of funny thing here with your desktop wallpaper showing in the background. And it looks a little bit different too. I really don't like that. I liked the way Alt tab and Win tab worked in Windows 7. So that was a bit disappointing, but at least they worked to some degree. Also new are keyboard shortcuts. From what I understand, there's a multitude of those that have been introduced. I haven't worked with them a whole lot, but there's a lot of neat stuff both in the command prompt and the desktop environment that can take advantage of those. There's some smaller stuff too that's noteworthy. Many icons now have a weirder look to them that looks like they just changed it just for the heck of changing it. They don't look super bad, but they just don't look that nice either, like they did in Windows Vista and Windows 7. Some of those icon changes are apparent through all different areas of the experience, but most notably in Windows Explorer and in the control panel. One thing that I found really disappointing, and I don't know if this is by design for Windows or if it's just an anomaly of the release preview, but you cannot change any Windows Update settings. You cannot, have it remind you that updates are available and manually choose to download them and then manually have them installed. They're just always installed automatically. There might be a workaround for this. I haven't done a whole lot of homework on these kind of features in Windows 10, but this kind of thing is never a good sign. Also, this stupid little touch keyboard toolbar always appears down here. And again, I don't know if that's just an anomaly of VMware trying to trick Windows into thinking that this has a touch screen, but that too is not a good sign. Also noteworthy is that the Hibernate feature now appears to be gone by default. If I go into my power options over here and I go to the area where you would normally go to enable that feature, you can see that it's not even an option in the things down here. You also can't disable hybrid shutdown anymore on computers that have trouble with it. In fact, the only options down here are to turn standby on and off, and if you want the lock button to show up in the shutdown options screen. So that's kind of weird. Don't know what's up with that. Anyway, that pretty much covers everything that's new. Let's take a look at what's old. Okay, we'll start on a positive note here. It has the same sound scheme as Windows 8 did. Now, if you remember my Everything You Need to Know video about the final release of Windows 8, you'll remember that the sound scheme was one of the few things that I actually wholeheartedly approved of in Windows 8. And that same sound scheme exists here. Unfortunately, all the other sound schemes are totally gone. Nobody knows what happened to them. Windows Vista and Windows 7 had this, big long list of sound schemes you could choose from, and well, they're still gone in Windows 10 after mysteriously vanishing in Windows 8 and 8.1. Also positive, the magic right-click start menu thingy with all these fantastic shortcuts still works. Now, one thing that for me was a huge letdown here with Windows 10, we still have the same old stale, flat, dated, and cheesy look of Windows 8. Arrow glass is nowhere to be found, and some applications that make use of the glassy features end up looking just plain weird. This is the multi-tab preview here in Pale Moon browser, and it's not supposed to look like this. In fact, this whole surface back here is supposed to be somewhat transparent. In Windows 8, it's just kind of flat gray, but in here it just looks weird. And that's just a strange graphical anomaly that wouldn't be there if the glass feature was properly implemented. Another tired feature that's still the same in Windows 10 is this thing here that comes up on the side when you click on the network button. I mean, in its defense, it basically shows you the same information as its smaller counterpart in Windows 7 and Windows Vista, but it just takes an unnecessarily long amount of time to open and just takes up an unnecessarily huge amount of screen real estate. It's just uncalled for. That's the only thing I have to say about it. Another unfortunate holdover from Windows 8 is the annoying flat login and logoff screens. I mean, the login and logoff screens as they existed on Windows Vista and Windows 7 looked fantastic. It was one of the largest letdowns in Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. And it was so puzzling that this kind of thing, was never fixed or changed or anything. And it still looks as bad as ever in Windows 10 preview. Other features that are still annoying as ever include this little gem here. This app cannot open because your screen resolution is too low. Now, I've set this virtual machine to 1280 by 720 resolution so that it'll fit perfectly when I edit the video and display it in 720p. But it wants a minimum height of 768. Now, my monitor is taller than 768, but like I said, I have it scaled down so that it'll be easier to record. And as a result, it won't even let me open half of this stuff, despite the fact that these things present a laughably small amount of information and require a laughably huge amount of space to show it. And that restriction is totally arbitrary, because now we can see that for the first time ever, you can resize and make smaller these start menu applications. And as you can see here, I opened this one when the computer was still in 1280 by 800 resolution so that it would actually let it open, and then I just changed the resolution and it still let me keep it here. In fact, even though this is the smallest you can resize one of these, it's still shorter than 720, so I don't know why that restriction is on there. That's just silly. Another thing with these start menu applications is there's just so many of them installed by default. It's just ridiculous. I left most of them on here just so you can see how many of them there are. But just so we're clear, I'm going to be uninstalling the majority of these after I've finished recording this video. The bottom line with these big goofy start menu applications is they're basically useless. There's no point in even attempting to use them. Also still annoying is the default applications pop-up. That's a holdover from Windows 8. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea. This is just one of those things that just needs to go back to the way it was in Windows Vista and Windows 7. That's all that needs to be said about that. As we close here, I'll just demonstrate a few more kind of minor annoying things that I would have expected to see fixed here and didn't. You still have no options for desktop widgets. Now, I never really used them in Windows Vista or Windows 7, but I'm sure some people did and probably found them useful. And then Microsoft arbitrarily decided with Windows 8 that there was no need for them anymore, which I really don't get. So I guess we can just throw that on the pile of features that still appear to be lost. Also annoying is the same old time and date screen. I guess I'll really try to be generous here. I'm really going to try to give Microsoft the benefit of the doubt here and say that this can be helpful because it tells you the time and the date while the computer is locked. But it doesn't do a whole lot beyond that. But I will give them credit for not forcing the time and date screen on you when the computer starts up. So we're making progress here, even if it's in very, very, very small increments. And in a nutshell, that's really everything you need to know about Windows 10. Now, I'm sure there's probably a number of things that I missed because I didn't have a lot of time to spend researching this and playing around with it. But this, big long list of things that I just went over covers basically the majority of things that are different and noteworthy about it. Whether you agreed with my thoughts on them or not, I highly recommend that you do download the preview and install it and use the feedback feature to tell Microsoft how you think, because as they said in that How To Geek article, this is really your only chance to make your voice heard to Microsoft with regards to features that you liked or didn't like. If you have something to say about it, now's the time. With that said, I hope you found today's video entertaining and informative, and be sure to stay tuned to the all-new Channel 2012 for the latest in video clips, reviews, guides, food, computers, general around the house, and other high-quality, high-definition uploads. Thanks for watching.